Good afternoon, everyone. I'm back for step 2 of our still life painting project. It's a little bit later in the day, so the light is a little bit darker, but that's okay. I wanted to go over what we're going to be covering today, which is bringing in some basic color and talking about how to map that out. So you may remember from last time that set up still life, and here's that still life I'm working with. Um, Remember, I talked a little bit about working from life, drawing from life. This was my sketch in the sketchbook. And then I've gone, one thing I noticed is that when I drew this, I made the model too tall. The neck's not long enough. There's some adjustments that needed to be made. Good thing that was just in my sketchbook. When I went for the final piece on the 12 by 9 by 12 sheet, you can see that I've worked with proportions a little bit more. So let's look at that a little bit more carefully. Before I start, some people have asked how my collage drawing turned out, and I want to show you that. So here is the finished collage drawing there, and then of course this is the collage I worked from. So, again, I really like working through these projects with you guys, and I just wanted to show you the progress of where it ended up. I've seen some really great examples of the collage drawing, so I look forward how you guys can tackle this painting project. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to get set up to paint this now. You can see that I've mapped out my composition. I've stayed pretty close to scale, had to shrink it down a little bit. Decided to go with a portrait composition because it fit a little bit better overall. And I've got a little bit of space, right? I don't want to crowd the borders too much, and I don't want to make it too small. So think about, relatively the size of your hand, some of these objects be a good placement for these. Okay, so we're ready to go. Here's what we're going to do. I recommend some sort of board to work on. All right, this is an old piece of masonite board. You can see it's just like, chipboard. It has a smooth surface. You can use an old piece of cardboard. The more rigid the material, the better. If you have to, if you don't have anything, you can actually use the back of your pad, right? That could be a way to do this too. What we want to do is, we're applying a lot of water to the surface, and in doing so, the paper is going to start to buckle. So if we have the edges taped down, then it will stretch back flat when we're done. So what I'll do here is just tape the edges down. So some glue tape. And I'm just gonna go all the way around, try to keep it as even as you can here. There we go. Like that. I've got my board. What I want to do is press down hard around the edges so the tape is holding this around. Don't just do the corners, do the whole thing. That way it will, again, pull itself flat when you're finished painting. All right, I'm just going to pause for a second, get my paint set up, and we'll get started. All right, folks. So what I want to do with this project is start with the background. So the first thing I'm doing is I'm just mixing up a lot of green. My background is this sort of green color. And I have a scrap piece of paper that I'm testing out the color and comparing it to my still life. It's going to be a little hard for me to flip back and forth, but maybe I'll try to I'll try to subvert in a few images so you can see what I'm working on back and forth a little bit. The editing process. So what I've got going on here is mixing up some green that matches my background, and I'm mixing up a whole bunch. So it takes a little bit of time. You got to go back and forth, mix, add water, mix, add water, so you get the right density. I'm going to add a lot of water in here because I'm going to need a lot of paint to cover up that background surface. Err on the side of light, so don't go too dark right away. You can always add more layers afterwards. So I'm going to make this paint thin. Okay, I'm ready to paint, and I've got my paint here that's pretty watery. It's pretty thin, but it's going to fill in the background. I've got the two larger brushes from my set. So I've got this flat brush and this round brush, and I'm using both of them as I go. This one is going to be good for filling in large areas. This one is going to be good for cutting around different areas around the lines. So I'll begin by filling this in the background and show you where I'm at from there. Okay, so I've got the basic background mapped out. It looks pretty splotchy right now. We're gonna let this dry a little bit. That will help. And then once we're a little bit further along with the painting, I'm gonna go back and add a little bit more to the background to sort of like smooth things out a little bit and add a little bit of transitional tones. So this is just to get a bit of a footprint in, the background in. The reason why I like to add the background in first is, once you are painting in all of these details, it can be really difficult to paint around them. And also, when I look at something like the glass bottle, I can definitely see the color of the green through it. And so that helps to inform um, the reflections and the translucency that I'm going to be painting into very, very soon. So I'll pause it for now. I'll let this dry a little bit and we'll come back to it. Okay, folks, so I just finished applying a very light second layer. You can see it's smoothing out a little bit. I'm going to go back over this again once I get into more details. Once more, we're going to let this dry and come back and start filling some things in. Okay, so we're back and we've pretty well dried. It's still a little buckled. When you do this, you'll see how the paper can really buckle, and that's why we have it taped down. So next step, what I want to do is start to map out the colors, the base colors of each one of these objects, okay? Now, what I want everyone to consider is look for any areas that you see in the composition that are going to be bright white. And what I'm going to do now is just kind of map those out. I see some kind of curving triangular reflections in the bottle here, which I'm just going to draw in really quickly. I also see on the shoulder of the bottle, there's a bit of a highlight. And then up in here, there's a bit of a highlight as well. And I also see a little bit up in here that I'm just going to mark off, maybe a little bit through here. So those are areas that I just want to leave the white of the paper. We can't erase, so we want to plot that out accordingly. Everywhere else has tone, and I want to start to build that in. Now, because I have this background color ready to go, I'm going to take a look at my bottle because I see a lot of green through the bottle in the background. So I'm just going to, first step for me is I'm going to use that green color and build in some of those tones. So I'm going to switch to some smaller brushes. I've got the small flat and the small round brush, and just start to bring in some of those colors. Now, I'm going to work pretty lightly and just bring in a little bit of that tone bit by bit. So I definitely see it encroaching in the background here beyond the where the liquid is reflected. So I'm going to add some green in through here. I do see some other green coming in through the background here, which I'm going to add in. And again, this is lighter than the background color. I'm keeping it really kind of washy to begin with because I'm going to build up layers and layers until I get more effective qualities. Now, what I want to do is look at the direction of the marks. I'm seeing the marks kind of going around the back of the bottle, so I'm trying to keep my marks curving in that direction as I apply the paint. So adding some green in there. I also see a little bit in the lid, a little bit up in here. And I can see through the bottle back over here a little bit and a little bit over here. So again, you're just bringing in lightly some of those base tones that you see. And in particular, because I have a translucent object, I want to make sure that I get that color in of the background reflecting through. Now it's really light, it's not dense like the background color because we're seeing it through the bottle. Finally, a little bit of green down at the bottom because I certainly see it reflected on the bottom of that piece part. So I add this in, a little bit of green. All right, next, I'm going to mix up the liquid color, which is going to be a bit more of a purple. So I've already got this purple here I've got going. I'm going to go to my Prussian blue and the crimson together to make a nice deep reddish purple, something like this. And I'm going to start and thin that down a bit, add a couple of drops of water in. you know, because I can always go back and make things darker. It's a little bit harder to make things lighter. So here I'm going to start with the top, and I'm going to, you know, just paint in a little bit of that color again, lightly, because I can always go back, and I'm going to need to add layers in here. And again, I'm trying to think about the direction of the marks. You know, the bottle is certainly cylindrical, and I want to include that as I paint into this. All right, so this. So it lightens up a little bit and does some weird stuff on the edges. So I'm gonna try to mimic that a little bit and not get too close to the edge for right now. And then a little bit darker in the front, so I'm gonna add a little bit more blue, and then I'm just gonna bring in some color, and I'm gonna keep these lines going vertical. Try to get them as smooth as I can. Again, it's gonna look a little splotchy and streaky when you start out. But as we layer in more color, it'll get to smooth itself out a lot better. Right. I know it's difficult, but try to work quickly. You don't want it to, the way that things get streaky is when they dry too fast. So keep the paint with a lot of liquid in there, a lot of water, and that will help aid in the streakiness as you're bringing this in. So I know it's easier said than done, but you know, think about just going back and adding water as you go and kind of back painting. So what I mean by that is kind of going back and making sure that this is all wet again. All right, now what I like to do with this paint is, once I've got this blocked in, I'll take the flat brush, I'll wet it a little bit, and I'll just hit the surface a little bit more to sort of smooth it out. You know, this is watercolor. It's gonna show its qualities, which are kind of streaky, wet, drying at different speeds, but that's kind of the beauty of it as well. All right, got the liquid in there. I see a little bit of darkness down here. I'm just gonna throw a little bit of purple down there. That's pretty good. I think what I'm gonna do next is the glove. So I'm gonna mix up a color for that. And I can see that the glove is a lighter blue. So I'm going to mix it. I'm going to go for the cobalt here. Mix that over here. And certainly it's going to be a bit more pastel in color. And so what I'm going to do is grab some of the white and lighten that up a little bit. And again, I'm just looking for the base color here. What I'm going to do is light it. So when I look at the glove, I can see there's light and dark areas. What I'm shooting for is the lightest area of the glove and trying to match that color. And again, kind of always test it out a little bit before you go into those darker colors. I might need a little bit of green in here just to tint it back a little bit, ever so slightly. More white. Getting there, getting there, getting there. That's better. All right. I'm liking that. I think that's pretty good. Add some more water into this. And again, I'm going to work pretty quickly and just fill in as much of the surface as I can. Okay, so I've got the base color of the glove down. Again, it's going to look splotchy. It's okay. We're going to work with layers here, but it's good to get all those tones in to begin with. And then what I'm going to do now is work with the shell. And the shell, what I can see, again, it's always good to have a paper towel laying around. Get a little bit of water and clean up this palette a little bit here. It's always also good in case you make a mistake. And then what I'm going to do is mix up a bit of this sienna color down here, which is pretty nice, along with this ochre. And that's going to give me kind of this muted orange tone, which I'm seeing in the shell pretty well. And those two in combination are going to create a nice tone. I'm going to use a lot of water in this shell because it is pretty light in color. So let's talk about kind of a cool technique that we can try, which is I'm going to take my bigger round brush, and it's just kind of full of water right now. So what I'm going to do is just paint in some water, clean water. Well, it's got a tint of green in it. That's all right though. Paint in a little bit of water here so it wets the surface of the paper.
You don't want it to be dripping like a dripping puddle, but you just want it to be a little bit watery. So what I'm trying to achieve with this is the shell has these beautiful striations of color that are actually kind of blurry. And so if I wet the paper first, then I can apply pigment to it and it will disperse in a really interesting pattern. And I can use that to my advantage. I would recommend, maybe doing a test study to begin with to see what this effect will do. But, there are ways to do some editing after the fact, which I'll show you a little bit. All right, got this color. It's pretty dense. So I'm going to add some more water into here. Okay, there we go. All right, that's pretty good. And then I'm just going to take this color and start to pop it in where I see the brown color and drag it around. You notice that it's like blending in really interesting ways, kind of following through. So I'm going to add this in a few different areas and just kind of let it do what it does, and then come back to it. Part of this is we're working with water, and water has its own properties, dries in different ways, and that can be really interesting and create effects that no other medium can do. So we're going to use it to our advantage with this painting. I'm going to kind of try to keep the contours going around the shell that I'm seeing in the marks that I make, and knowing that they're going to kind of blur and blend in different ways. So again, test this out on a scrap sheet of paper before you try it. It is the type of thing where you just sometimes need to take a chance and commit to something and see what's going to happen. That's what I'm doing here. Not that I've never done this before, but still, it is a little bit risky along the way. Okay, so I've got that in. We'll let that dry. Actually, before this dries, what I might do is add a little bit of contrast. So I've got this blue color here. I'm going to add a little bit of this Prussian blue in here, darken that up a little bit. And I'm just going to drop in a little bit of blue because it's definitely got some tones of blue. I don't like that blue. Let's remix that over here a little bit. It's okay. If you don't like what you've done, right here, you can often take a paper towel and just blot it. Ooh, I like the blotting actually. That's not so bad. So I'm just going to take a little bit of this Prussian blue and add a little bit in here and some speckles. And that's going to be a complement, and so it's going to mix a little bit and add some nice contrast into this as well. It's also going to create some interesting textures. So, I'm just trying to look to see where I can see a little bit darker values in, and this is going to definitely work to my advantage already, I can tell. I've got some darker values in here. It's mixing pretty nicely and feeling rather organic. That's about as far as I'm going to go there. Let that dry. And while I'm waiting for that, the inside of it is slightly violet, this weird kind of pale violet color. Pick up this little drop of water there too. So I'm going to add that into same process. I'm just going to add some clean water. We're as clean as I got right now. And I'm going to put it on the inside of the shell. Not all the way to the edges, but definitely the inside areas that are a little bit darker. And I'm going to bring that down through here. And then I'm going to mix up. Here's a pink that I had started. I'm going to add some of this violet into it. Get a really watery kind of tone. I don't want too much pigment here. I just want a little bit to sort of darken it. And I'm going to add a little bit of green to make it a little bit weirder. The green is going to be almost like a complement, and so it's going to tint it down a little bit and mute it. So here now what I'm going to do is start to bring in this purpley color and get close to the edge, but not quite to the edge, and pull it through the piece and allow for that edge to reveal where the light is hitting, and then pull it down through the rest of the composition like this. All right, so you can see this wet on wet technique is, again, working great for the shell because the shell is so textural and organic and multicolored that this is going to work well. So I'm going to keep that. Pull a little bit of this purple into here too, because there's some of it reflected in. Well, I think I need to let this dry a bit more, but that's not bad. All right, so for step 2, we've made a big mess. But for step 1, we rendered the composition, we set it up, we sketched it out. Step 2 is definitely starting to add some color into this and value, mostly the lighter values, and then experimenting with those sort of base colors. So I lost my hat. That's all for now. I'll see you next time for step 3. When we start to work in more details, look for light and shadow, add more complex colors, and we'll slowly build up this painting. See you all soon.